Gus, this week in Fortune magazine, Admiral Mike Mullen said we're vulnerable to the military and our governments, but I think we're more vulnerable to commercial cyber attacks. What motivates these cyber terrorists to go after the commercial sector?
Well, there's a lot of motivations that are happening in the world here. It's everything from money, hacking for fun and profit. It's the concern about cyber war, keeping strategic advantage. But what really is motivating this is what I call an unfortunate natural progression of things, right? As more and more of the things that we do are abstracted out of the physical world into the virtual world, it actually creates the environment into which the desire to be in there to take advantage of it emerges, right? So as money moves out of being in your pocket, you know, or in banks and things like that, into being in your cell phone or just in electronic form, clearly if you organize crime, you're going to go after where the money is, and that happens to be where it is online and on the networks and things like that, right? It's the basis of why did Willie Sutton rob banks, right? Willie Sutton robbed banks because
the money was.
Right, exactly.
The follow-up question to the Admiral was, people don't seem to feel the intensity of the threat because it's abstract and not well understood. Yet the potential is to shut down the transportation system, MasterCard, big banks, airline system. What do we need to do to bring an awareness to the commercial sector?
So that's a really tough question to answer because, as I think most of us know, threats, whether they're physical or they're virtual, are actually abstract until they happen to us, right? Okay, and it doesn't matter whether it's you're reading about crime being committed in your city or someplace else, as long as it hasn't happened to you. You see it on the news, you hear about these things, but until the event becomes personal, it's really hard for people to take it seriously to heart. But what I see emerging is actually probably a collation of the needed, which is that this awareness of the fact that as the threats begin to shift and merge and transition from script kiddies to organized crime to nation states, there's a body of law and things which are also emerging on the other side of the equation. Everything from HIPAA and Sarbanes-Oxley to disclosure laws and things like that about your being vulnerable and attacked. That are going to drive, I think, a set of behaviors which are going to be necessary for us to act together as a group and as a nation and take advantage of capabilities which we know are there and things which I think was said earlier in one of the previous talks. We have all these capabilities that exist. We just haven't had the wherewithal and the will to take advantage of them and make them, I don't know if mandatory is necessarily the right word, but to take advantage of them so that we can make ourselves safer in this new space.
How fast is the capability for mischief of the bad guys growing?
Well, this is the scary set of numbers that's out there. I saw an article that was talking about, by their estimation, that in 1 month, malware writers produce more code than an entire year of legitimate software development for the entirety of the world. All right, the latest semantic report on 2011, I don't know how many people saw that or read that was just released. They claim that there were 5.5 billion attacks were stopped worldwide in 2011, and that was up almost 100%, right, from the year before. Right? The 117 million new malware variants emerged. Oh my God, if that number is true, that's 320,000 new variants of malware a day that were coming out and being inserted into the ecosystem and things like that, right? And so by any measure, anybody can put on the table, their ability to do things, act fast, be extraordinarily agile is frightening across all scales of the system.
Traditional military threats, whether you're coming at me with a Navy or an Air Force or ground force, is pretty easy to spot. How much of this is just absolutely hidden until after the fact?
Well, this is actually a very hard thing to detect. It's so when you and I met, we talked about it was about big data and the big data challenges we face into our future. Cybersecurity is just another form of the giant big data challenge, and your problem is you're looking for small anomalous behaviors in billions and billions of packets of information that are flowing around, or you're looking for slight behavioral changes on your systems as a result of somebody inserting technology things onto it. So I actually think that one of the big emerging trends that's going to happen in the world is a focus on how do we leverage the technologies that are enabling us to do things like the social media work, enabling Google to place ads more intelligently in front of you on a page, able to find you as a target of one in a sea of noise, are the very same technologies that we're going to have to bring to bear to deal with this world of malware and cyber threats in order to detect the emergence of a threat, right? As it happens, or as it occurs, be able to then isolate that threat, wall it off, and then allow the rest of our systems to continue to operate. And this is going to be, I think, an interesting marriage of what has come out of this social media world and into what happens to be the cyber world that's there.
I'm interested now a little bit about your job. The potential for huge financial loss in the commercial sector is there. What is your interaction? You're a government employee. What's your relationship with the private industry?
Well, our relationship with the private, so first of all, I have to be very clear, we are in this for national security reasons, right? And so from my agency and the things that we do are highly focused on national security, but the government itself is very focused and very concerned about what's happening to the private sector, because I think it's pretty clear that from a national security perspective, right, businesses and businesses' ability to operate, stability in the marketplace, competitive nature of our businesses, all these things are as important from a national security perspective as fundamentally being able to protect command and control in wartime and other things like that. And so you'll see that in all the cyber initiatives that have come out, there's a lot of effort, I think, trying to be put towards engaging better with the private sector, engaging better with the financial markets, engaging better with the universities and things like that to help us coherently deal with this as a unified whole, as opposed to trying to rely on an omnipotent power of one to be able to do these sorts of things.
Mark talked a little bit earlier in the discussion of IP of the importance to have people from any consortium around the world, from any of the sectors. Are there global alliances in place to work with you and your agency to address the good guys on one side and the bad guys on the other?
Yeah. So I'm not sure there's any form of a major global alliance at the governmental level, right? And so how we engage with allies and things like that is one thing. I think a lot of what you'll see emerging in the global alliances is actually probably going to start out of the private sector. Banking, for example, right, has a common vested interest across the financial community to ensure that their transactions can be conducted securely and safely and things like that. I think you'll see that happen very quickly. But I do believe that as the threats mature and nation-state actors become more mature and the technology diffuses more effectively, that you will begin to see a need for the emergence of things like the equivalent of strategic arms limitation talks and things like that to begin to happen around these weapons that are now digitally based as opposed to physical assets that you toss into the air or other things like that to commit attacks. And this is only going to be true because of the fact that without that sort of engagement, it's going to become very difficult for any sort of confidence to stand in any nation, right, around the world.
So what keeps you awake at night?
Wow. Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that keeps me awake at night is how we in government can keep pace with the rapid innovations and developments that are happening in the commercial sector. Government is notoriously, I'll use the word inefficient in its ability to insert innovation, develop technologies, act very quickly, shift direction. It's like any large bureaucracy, for example, that they just have their own inertia on things that are happening, and there's an entire structure around how we do things, an entire body of law that exists. And yet, when you look in the outside world, the velocity of innovation is just continuing to accelerate. And this velocity of innovation is actually, I believe, being driven by three fundamental forces that are out there. We call this the social mobile cloud paradigm that we're watching and has observed. The cloud computing has taken all the friction out of the ability for somebody to stand up a new company, a new idea, and go from idea to implementation in record time, right? I no longer have to go out and acquire my own infrastructure and do these things like that. It's taking all the friction out of that system and allowing just ideas to emerge and take off and allow things to happen very quickly. Start fast, succeed fast, or fail fast, and start fast, succeed fast. Start fast, grow fast, succeed fast, or fail cheap to take place in this space, right? And so the cloud is that kind of an enabler of this underlying digital world and digital economy that brings it off. The mobile space has enabled an engagement model of people. Sorry, am I not broadcasting? I guess not. Well, I can hear myself now. Okay, mobile space has taken all the friction out of the people's ability to engage with each other at work and at play and enable this constant sort of model of people engaging with people and people engaging with data that has to exist. And then when you look at the social space, what was really interesting about the social space is it took us a long time to figure out what the organizational value was of all the social media that's out there. But fundamentally, the social space is what took friction out of organizations, enabling a higher velocity of people and their ideas to begin to get to the form of implementation and exchange them. So all these three things together, what we see is driving this extraordinary pace of development and innovation in the outside world. And that's the space where, as we look at it, how do you keep pace with it? How do you worry about it? And in the case that we're talking about here today, how do you begin to protect the ideas and the concepts and the stuff that are happening at a velocity that's been unseen, I think, over many years?
Against this geometric growth of the problem, how do you find and develop the talent that helps your organization stay ahead of the pack here?
I have to tell you that talent and talent management is one of the most important things that in fact, it's one of the biggest things we worry about, and it's one of the key focuses that we've taken on as an organization in order to help us drive our future. No matter where you go, or no matter where I go around the country or any place else, one of the principal discussions we fall into is where are we going to get the necessary talent and skills to be able to do the jobs that we have. So I have the fortunate opportunity to spend a lot of time, for example, out in Silicon Valley, meeting with a lot of the venture capital firms that we were talking about on the, Bill was talking about in the session just before us, meeting with a lot of these small companies, and their problem is out there is that they simply can't get enough people with the necessary skills and understanding of how to apply some of these new technologies and techniques in this world to get things done. And then we have to worry about what that world is willing to pay and offer people, and then you come back to government and look at what government needs, which is these very same sets of skills, and our ability to be competitive and offer opportunities to kids out of school to come in and do jobs that we need at pay scales which are significantly different than, I'll put it that way, than what happens in the outside world. We are fortunate in our business that a lot of the things that we do and the interest in the national security arena and some of the unique problems and challenges that we get to take on and solve is an attractor that we have that is independent from the financial motivations and other things like that that are out there. So it helps us to do well, but the talent competition out there is extremely scary, and I'll tell you, I know this group probably talks a lot about science and technology, the STEM education issues that we face. But from us, from a national security perspective, this is a huge problem that we are extremely worried about. How do we get enough, in our case, U.S. citizens to take on these the hard, science, technology, education, mathematics, engineering, and mathematics educational disciplines, so that we can then bring them to work in our environment? It really is a gap that we see and worries us extraordinarily as we look out particularly out into the future where we want to go.
I worry a lot about geometric progressions, mostly in the energy industry, but I think you have the same issue here where yesterday's solution is not good enough for today. We have linear responses to geometric problems. Does this suggest that the word secure is now an obsolete concept in this space?
So what we say is you got to think about security differently in this world. So I think the short answer is yes, but now I'll give you the long answer. Okay. The fact is that we all know that absolute security is absolutely impossible, right? I think everybody would agree with that, yes, right? That's just never going to happen. Well, the only way you're going to get absolute security in the information age is to simply not use information technology, right? Because then you're sure nothing's out there. And we know that doesn't work. So absolute security is absolutely impossible. And so what happens is this means you have to begin to think radically differently about how you build and deliver and deploy your information systems, how you build your systems and your services. Everything about it has to change, right? So you have to start with the premise that if absolute security is absolutely impossible, then you know you're going to get had, right? At some point or another, you know you're going to get had. And you're either going to get fish from the top, very popular mechanisms today. In fact, as a sidebar, I got 2 really interesting phishing attacks this morning in my email, which were really, really, really good. And it was very surprising. And one of the reasons, for example, for me, that I still use AOL mail, by the way, this isn't an advertisement for AOL, is they have a funny little thing called view source. You guys know this, right? You can open up an email, look at a flattened text copy of it, then do all the traceback on the addresses and figure out that this was definitely a phishing attack, right? But they're getting very sophisticated at the top. Under the covers, they get more and more sophisticated underneath at the bottom, and it seems like all we wind up doing is, on the bottom, is keep building digging deeper moats, building higher walls, and inserting new technology as different shims in between at every possible level, so that when they find a way between two shims, you have to put in another shim that's down there. So you assume you get fish from the top, or you're going to get attacked from the bottom. Therefore, if you assume it's going to happen, then you have to think about, how do I minimize the loss that could occur, right, when I actually get penetrated? And that's where you have to begin to put a lot of thought, and this is where the intentional design of your systems and your capabilities has to begin to emerge. And these are the things you have to do radically differently than the standard models of what you do. So, for example, we talk about the fact that that assuming you're going to get had, how do you make sure that whatever they can get away with is a minimized set of anything, no matter how they steal credentials or whatever happens, or preferably in our world, the only thing they can get away with is encrypted data, and I can turn our, the private Manning issue that we had into Julian Assange's problem, as opposed to our problem dealing with Julian Assange, right? And what happened in that case. And so you got to think about how you're going to take your data and protect it very, very well. Encryption is a natural thing that comes to mind. You got to separate your data from your application so that I can't get easily into the data through any particular application. You got to use things like very strong credentials for your people, so that you know who's got access to stuff, so you can audit everything that's going on, right? And then at the end of the day, right, it's really going to require us to build our systems completely differently. The systems themselves are going to have to take on more of the characteristics of a polymorphic world, where they are constantly changing your attack surface and how you appear to everybody, as opposed to being fixed set destinations to which, even if I need with appropriate accesses, or or through an insider attack or anything else like that, where I can get dwell time onto a system, so I can put either hardware or software onto a system and therefore take advantage of it. If I don't know how the system operates and is continuously changing its attack surface, then you become a safer place. You're going to have to put all those things together as a coherent whole in order to deal with this world, because otherwise we have no choice. And because the only way to deal with the geometric progression is to get out of your current linear model, and that's what you have to do.
So is the government doing enough? According to the Admiral, the presidents have invested heavily here and will continue to do that, but are we doing enough?
So that's a tough question to answer, because it's really hard for government, I think, to figure out what's enough, all right? Too much views is intrusive by the private sector, but not enough. We heard earlier somebody say the government should do more that's there. But I'll put it to you this way. I think that from a government perspective, we are doing a whole lot of things. Government has a very active and long-term focus on the cyber problem. And this is just not simply in the national security realm, but also through organizations like DHS and the FBI, looking at it as a crime and a criminal prevention thing, as well as an educational opportunity, so that we can act and work together and make things happen. So from a government, just simply thinking about government itself, we are very committed as a government to trying to deal with this problem for the long haul, and we are in this for the long haul across the board. But it's not just government alone. Government cannot do this by themselves, and it's going to take a whole lot of active engagement by the private sector, active engagement with universities, for us to deal with this and figure out solutions in the space to address what you define very succinctly as a geometric problem in our linear world.
This sounds quite analogous to a homeowner cooperating with the police to make your home burglar-proof. You can't just leave the newspapers on the porch and leave the door unlocked. There's a piece that you've got to do, and the police will do their thing after the fact.
Yeah, this is, yes, so this is everybody's problem, okay? And it's not just one person's. In fact, I think the hardest thing, what we see happening is that, so in my community, we are very, very focused on this and have been for a very long time, because security matters extraordinarily to us. So this is nothing new, in our business, and yet, we worry about it constantly all the time and are always trying to improve where we are. I think for the commercial sector partners that we deal with who live in our world all the time, they've gotten this message really, really well, and they are doing things oftentimes because we mandate it, but they've also extended that into a lot of their the rest of their business dealings on the commercial side to ensure that they're protected and things like that. So very simple things, such as the one that was mentioned earlier, which is absolutely correct, making sure that the devices plugged into your network are the devices you control, all right? Now, this is getting really tough in this BYOD world, right? Bring your own device to work thing that's emerged now with the mobile phones and things like that. So how do you do that? Well, now there's this plethora of companies that have emerged on the scene that will create enclaves of compute on private devices to wall off your private world from your public world. And there's those sorts of things that we're going to have to look at and how we leverage to make sure that we have very high confidence that when you're doing your business work and you're protecting your business secrets, that they are enclaved and they're protected and they're isolated from whatever stupidity somebody might do in the private sector life on the other side of the coin. And so companies are getting smarter in this thing, but they're going to have to do more. And I think, sadly, maybe the only way that you're going to get some to respond is the penalties have to get larger than what is the current risk posture that they're willing to accept in order for people to take action. And those are the ones that worry me the most because they're the ones that become most vulnerable, and they're the ones that put all of us at risk. And then finally, I think the hardest challenge we face is just educating people, our kids, my parents, for example. What do you do, right? How do you learn not to do things like click on something which you're not sure about, right? How do you teach people how to find out, how to figure out whether or not I should go further in this thing? Should I open this email or not, right? How do we know or watching the fact that there's a shift away from email and into the social world as people themselves shift and move in the social world? So how do I make myself safer, more secure in the social world? All this requires, I think, a massive educational campaign that somehow or another we're going to have to make folks and kids smart, beginning, I think, in education in schools and parents talking about them and everything else like that, while we simultaneously work together as government and business, private sector, and universities to solve that problem for us as well.
During the Cold War, we relied on mutually assured destruction to keep people from launching missiles against each other. I don't see an analogous opportunity when somebody shoots something at us to shoot something back at them. Am I missing something here from the technology standpoint?
Well, so I can't comment directly on what you just asked me.
Sorry.
But but I'll put it to you this way. I do worry that I don't call it MAD, but I call it MAC, mutually assured chaos. I think we are rapidly heading into a world where the capabilities for us to do things that will just destabilize a lot of what happens in the world are very real. And the thing that is most worrying about the cyber threat to me is the fact that it is unlike the other intellectual property theft, jet engines and things like that we were talked about earlier, where, yeah, you can get the plans, but I still got to build a plant, and I still got to get the manufacturing, I still got to train my people, and I still got to do a bunch of other things to be able to do it, and that takes a lot of time. The moment any new threat is released into the wild, everybody's knowledge is elevated. Okay, this is an instantaneous outcome, and it doesn't require massive manufacturing infrastructures or anything like that to make it happen. And so as every one of these 117 million new variants that were released last year, according to Symantec, goes out into the wild, every single person who is a bad guy or wants to do malicious things, or wants to protect themselves, or wants to commit cyber war, or any of these other things you talk about, all of their knowledge was elevated every single time one of those was released, right? And so as every new vulnerability gets exploited and disclosed, everybody gets elevated in the knowledge base. So this becomes an unwinnable race if you begin to think about it from that optic. It is truly a frictionless, extraordinarily high velocity world into which change and capability advancement affects everybody on a global scale, right? This is not unique to those with specialized capabilities. All you need to do is have a couple of smart people who have enough education and talent, and they all get smarter very, very, very fast. This is really what makes this a very scary world for us to be in.
As I thought about some of the potential and think about stock exchanges and banks and MasterCard and flight schedules and the whole 9 yards, I tried to think about how would you do a Pareto analysis of where do you start and where do you stop? Yeah. When does it become minor? Right. Is it possible for you to sort of focus those efforts, or is this just so broad and so interconnected that doesn't help?
Wow, the old 80-20 rule.
Yep.
All right, 80% of the mischief is conducted by 20% of the people. Is that?
Yep.
That's where we are, yeah. Like everything in life, you're going to have to apply the Pareto rule to whatever you're going to do, right? Because if it doesn't make any sense that you're going to have to triage your attack on the problem, right? You're going to have to sit down and decide how do you, what's important to you, where are your weaknesses, where are your vulnerabilities, where are the things you have to shut down first. I think from the commercial sector and the community and things like that, there's a whole lot of new capabilities that have emerged to do exactly those analytics. Bringing in some of these new startups that have this ability to go out and analyze your network, tell you where you have your gaps, tell you have your holes, where you should button things up. These are things everybody should apply to everything that's doing across the board, right? The second thing you should do is do what was just discussed earlier, which is limit the number of devices you can actually plug into your network and take control of them, right? The third thing is you're going to have to identify the people that you want on your network. You have to identify them with assurance, right? These are all very logical steps that people that we have been doing and many have been doing for a very, very long period of time that others have not taken on, right? And so if you do those big things up front and you begin to do all that stuff, and then you get into some measure of patch management, although I've got to tell you, patch management in the commercial software world, anybody in the commercial software space, we need help with this. Because I've got to tell you, patch management is really tough, given release cycles and things like that, and incompatible patches with stuff that you're already running. This is a hard thing to do. And yet, if you don't keep up with patch management, you make yourself vulnerable. So do patch management, right? This is where you apply your energy. And then once you do those basics, the basic blocking and tackling, that's got to get done, and you have to do it very well, and you have to do it very well all the time. Then you begin to focus on the more esoteric sets of things that really could be potential very high threat vulnerabilities to you, or very high threat vulnerabilities to, in this case, we're talking a lot about intellectual property. What are the crown jewels that you want to protect, right? And how are you going to go about and protect those crown jewels? Right? And so you really have to think hard about what you want to put in place and make decisions on the 80-20 rule on those things, right? 20% of your intellectual property is 80% of your value to your company, right? How is it you are going to make sure that they are very, very, very hard to steal and get at from any mode of attack that you can possibly think about?
Okay, my last question. We got a lot of smart people sitting out there in this audience. What can they do for you and vice versa? What help can they give your agency, given their business capabilities and brains and so forth?
So I think a lot of it is trying to elevate, as we talked about earlier, how do you get people to begin to be concerned and act about this problem space, right? And what makes us vulnerable, particularly in this highly interconnected world, is when any of us ignore the problem, assuming that somebody else is going to take care of it for us, or conversely, when any of us ignore the problem under the false pretense that it will give me an additional advantage over my competitor who is worrying about the problem, so I'm going to spend less on security, so I think I can run faster in the space, and you make us vulnerable across the board they affect everybody. We have to act and begin to treat this security paradigm and these needs as first sets of actions. So what I would entreat people to do is to stop looking at security as a bolt-on and start thinking about security as absolutely embedded in every action and everything you build, every system that gets done across the board, everything that you do. You got to think about security as integral to every part of your entire infrastructure that you're dealing with. And if we can at least get that accomplished, we go a long way. The second thing is to help us change what I talked about earlier and adopt these new models of computing, change our attack surfaces, figure out ways to make stuff more secure, and bring that off. And that's going to take, I think, some energy and investment by us as a community, by us as a government, to drive this future forward.
I thank you very much, my friend.
Okay.